The seven corners of life. Three things you gotta know. You gotta know which way is up. You gotta know your place. You gotta know what time it is. Three ways how to do stuff good. Slow down. Finish what you started. Don't go and be getting any smart ideas in the meanwhile. One thing mighty to remember. Remember your name. 1. Boots on the ground. Every philosophy begins with a direction, not a theory, not an idea, but a direction. Which way is up? Before one can speak of gods, or forms, or freedom, or the mind, one must first learn to stand. Standing is not only a bodily act, it is a metaphysical alignment. The soul learns its own gravity by learning the pull of the earth beneath it. This is what the fragment calls the first of the three things you gotta know. Which way is up? It sounds simple, almost rustic, as though it belongs on the wall of a feed store. Yet, the deeper you listen, the more terrible it becomes. For up is not only vertical, it is moral, spiritual, ontological. To know which way is up is to resist the confusion of surfaces. It means to know what direction truth takes when it rises, and what force drags falsehood downward. Most people today live sideways, not up, not down, just laterally. They scroll, they drift, they shuffle. Their coordinates are horizontal. The fragment begins, then, by returning us to the vertical order of things. It insists, to live is to know direction. But one cannot live in direction without place. Hence the second thing, you gotta know your place. Place is not humiliation, it is orientation. The modern soul hears that line and flinches, as though to know your place were an insult. But the ancients knew better. To know one's place is to be properly situated in the order of being. It is to stand neither above nor below what one is, but within it, rightly. This is why the proud fall and the humble rise. Pride distorts orientation. Humility corrects it. And finally, you gotta know what time it is. This is not a question of clocks, but of epochs. Time, for the fragment, is not a flow, but a field, a texture of meaning that thickens or thins depending on one's attention. To know what time it is to know the mood of the age, the pulse of the moment, the threshold between one season of the spirit and another. The man who knows what time it is can act without confusion. He knows when to plant and when to reap, when to speak and when to keep silence. Thus, the first corner of life opens before us: direction, place, and time, the geometry of existence, the coordinates of the real. 2. Doing stuff good. The second triad, three ways how to do stuff good, shifts us from knowing to doing, from orientation to operation, from theory to practice. It begins with a command that sounds almost too simple for philosophy. Slow down. To slow down is to break with the world's demand for velocity. The zero-friction machine hungs on acceleration. It promises ease through speed. But every true act of creation, repair, or thought begins by moving slower than what surrounds it. Slowing down is a form of rebellion against chaos. It restores proportion, lets cause and effect breathe, lets the soul catch up with the body. Philosophers have always been slow, not lazy, not hesitant, slow. They pause before the sacred. They hold a word on the tongue until it burns. To slow down is not to retreat, it is to thicken the moment so that meaning can enter. Then, finish what you started. This is the ethics of completion. In a fractured world, nothing is finished. Not conversations, not loves, not projects, not prayers. To finish something, however small, is to resist entropy. It is to declare that meaning can endure through labor. The unfinished life is a wandering life. It leaves its seeds unsown, its circles unclosed. To finish what you start is to acknowledge that beginnings have consequences. that the act that opens must be matched by an act that closes. The third instruction, don't go and be getting any smart ideas in the meanwhile, is both a warning and a grace. It's the voice of wisdom disguised as a country uncle, the kind that knows too much about the world to trust cleverness. Smart ideas here mean those little internal detours by which we escape the work we began. The mind, halfway through a task, invents distractions, new philosophies, new angles, new justifications. All in the name of progress, but all designed to flee commitment. The fragment says, stay put, stay with the work. Do not run off chasing light when you are meant to tend the fire. These three, slow down, finish what you started, and don't get too clever in the meantime, form the second corner of life, discipline against dispersion. 3. The name. And then there is the last, one thing mighty to remember. Remember your name. This is the center of the seven corners, the hidden heart around which all the others turn. The name, in ancient thought, is not merely a label. It is the word by which being recognizes itself. To forget one's name is to dissolve into the anonymity of the crowd. To remember it is to awaken as a singular being before God and the world. When the fragment says mighty, it means mighty in the old sense, as in strength beyond measure. There is power in the act of remembering. Not memory as nostalgia, but memory as retrieval, drawing the self back from dispersion into presence. When a man remembers his name, the noise of the world dims. He becomes a tuning fork for the real. The name is not self-esteem. It is not personality. It is vocation. It is what the old mystics meant by calling. It is that unique intersection between one's nature and one's necessity. To live without the name is to live as an orphan. To remember it is to stand in the line of inheritance, the bloodline of meaning itself. 4. The corners and the center. The fragment calls them corners, not pillars or rules. A corner suggests an angle, a meeting point between planes. To live in the seven corners is to live in the geometry of relation. Corners make rooms. They make dwelling possible. Think of a room with 7 corners. It cannot exist in ordinary space. The number breaks the symmetry of the cube. It suggests a sacred architecture, something irregular yet complete. The 7 corners of life, then, are not meant to be literal. They are a way of saying life's integrity requires more dimensions than reason alone can measure. Each corner corresponds to an orientation: up, place, time, patience, completion, humility, and memory. Together, they make a dwelling for the human spirit. They are not commandments, but bearings. Not thou shalt, but this is how the compass lies. The modern world has lost its corners. It has walls without joints, surfaces without edges. Everything slides into everything else. But a corner, rightly understood, is the place where 2 directions meet and define each other. To live at the corners is to live at the joints of reality, where things touch and make sense. 5. The gravity of knowing. Knowing which way is up might sound like a physical matter, but in metaphysics, it is the first principle of sanity. Without orientation, thought itself collapses. The ancients said that chaos is not disorder, but disorientation, the loss of the axis mundi, the world's spine. When the soul no longer knows which way is up, it cannot distinguish heaven from hell. It drifts. Philosophy then begins as recovery of the vertical. To ask which way is up is to reintroduce the idea of higher and lower, of transcendence. The postmodern mind rejects height as hierarchy, but in doing so, it flattens the world into sameness. Up no longer means divine, down no longer means infernal. Everything is level, and therefore meaningless. But up does not oppress below, it illuminates it. The higher calls the lower to its own fullness. To live upwardly is not to deny the ground, but to redeem it. The boots on the ground, as the removed lines once said, are not an abandonment of the sky, they are its anchor. 6. The humility of place. To know your place is to consent to reality. It does not mean to be small, it means to belong. When man ceases to know his place, he becomes monstrous. He either shrinks himself into nothing, denying his dignity, or inflates himself into godhood, denying his limits. Both are forms of homelessness. The human place is between animal and angel, between earth and heaven. The fragment's voice, part proverb, part command, recognizes this in its plainness. You gotta know your place is not cynical, it is compassionate. It says, you are not all, but you are not nothing. And in that middle place, one can act rightly. The man who knows his place can lift his eyes without arrogance and bow his head without shame. 7. The time of the living. You gotta know what time it is. Every age has its own illness, and the cure begins with no right people have the choice. Is this all right people are the truth? We live in a time of distraction, speed, and spectacle, a time when the infinite has been compressed into the instant. To know this and yet not be destroyed by it is wisdom. Time is the great teacher, but it is also the great thief. It steals what it gives. The philosopher learns to live between those two hands, gratitude and grief. To know what time it is to stop pretending immortality. It is to act while there is still breath. The ancients marked time by stars and seasons. We mark it by notifications. Yet the soul still needs rhythm. It cannot live in constant exposure. Knowing what time it is today may simply mean knowing when to turn the screen off and look out the window. 8. Slowing the world. The first of the ways how to do stuff good is not merely about pace, but about perception. Slow down, and the world reveals its structure. Everything rushing becomes invisible. A bird in flight is seen only when it pauses on a wire. Slowness is attention stretched across time. It is the refusal to let the present evaporate into anticipation. When you slow down, causality returns. One thing follows another. Life becomes legible again. Philosophical thought is a form of deceleration. It drags meaning through the mud until it shines. To slow down is to give being the dignity of being noticed. 9. The integrity of completion. Finish what you started. The second principle of doing is closure. Closure is not stagnation, it is fulfillment. When you finish something, you declare that the world can be brought to form, that chaos can yield to order. The unfinished is always haunted. It leaves loose ends that whisper at night. Completion, in this sense, is a moral act. It affirms that something can be done well enough to rest. In a world addicted to endless updates, to finish is almost subversive. The philosopher, like the craftsman, knows this. The work shapes the worker. To finish what you start is to be finished by it. 10. The wisdom of not knowing better. Don't go and be getting any smart ideas in the meanwhile. This is perhaps the fragment's most humorous and most profound line. It warns against the arrogance of intellect divorced from life. The clever man builds theories, while the wise man builds homes. Smart ideas, when untethered from humility, become engines of destruction. This is not anti-intellectualism. It is a reminder that thought must serve being, not replace it. The danger of smart ideas is not that they are false, but that they are sterile. They produce no fruit. The fragment says, better to be faithful than inventive, better to be steady than brilliant. 11. The name and the world. To remember your name is to remember the world, because names bind things together. In Genesis, Adam names the creatures, and through naming, relation is born. To forget your name is to forget your kinship with the real. In an age of masks, handles, and avatars, remembering your name is a radical act. It means standing exposed. It means letting the world know who speaks. But there is a second layer, the divine whisper. Every soul is called by a name that only it can hear. To remember it is to awaken vocation. Philosophy is not an escape from this calling, but its deepening. The philosopher remembers not only what things are, but what he is called to be among them. 12. The Seven Corners Revisited. Taken together, the seven corners form a kind of moral compass. 3 things to know, 3 ways to act, and 1 thing to remember. Knowledge, action, memory, the triune pattern of existence. The fragment's tone is humble, but its reach is cosmic. It maps the entire human task in plain speech. The great philosophies of East and West can be condensed into this structure: knowing, doing, remembering. The soul learns where it is, how to move, and who it is. Everything else is ornament. 13. The severe reality of our situation. The final line of the removed section deserves resurrection, not verbatim but in spirit. Consider for a moment the severe reality of our situation, if you will. To live within the 7 corners is to confront that severity. Life is not gentle, it is precise. The corners are sharp because they define. They cut illusion from truth. The severe reality is that meaning requires boundaries, and freedom requires form. Philosophy, rightly lived, is not comfort. It is discipline toward coherence. It teaches how to stand in the storm of being without falling apart. 14. The dwelling of the human. The 7 corners are not just principles, they are architecture. To live within them is to build a house for the soul, a shelter of wisdom in the open weather of existence. Imagine the man who abides by them. He knows which way is up, so he is not lost. He knows his place, so he is not envious. He knows what time it is, so he is not anxious. He slows down, so he sees. He finishes what he starts, so he is trustworthy. He avoids clever self-betrayal, so he endures. And he remembers his name, so he cannot be erased. Such a man is not extraordinary. He is sane. Sanity, in this world, is the highest courage. 15. Closing reflection. There is a quiet power in the fragment's simplicity. It speaks the way the old ones spoke, in instructions that sound like chores but conceal metaphysics. Each line could be carved on a workbench, murmured over a grave, or written in a notebook at dawn. The philosopher in me loves its humility. The poet in me loves its rhythm. The man in me fears its truth. These are indeed the 7 corners of life. 7 bearings in a world that no longer believes in direction, place, time, or name. Yet here they are, offered plainly, without adornment. A code for being human in the broken geometry of the modern age. And so we return to the beginning, boots on the ground, eyes lifted, hands steady, and the name remembered. The 7 corners are not a theory. They are a way to stand.